King Ahab is widely considered as one of the worst rulers that ancient Israel ever had. He was able to commit more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of the kings who came before him. King Ahab was the seventh king of the northern kingdom of Israel. He is said to have reigned from around 874 to 853 BC century. Ahab's father, King Omri, had left him a large empire that included territory east of the Jordan River, Gilead, Bashan, and Moab. 1 Kings 16, verse 30-33. Ahab son of Omri did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. This king was known for his cruelty and ruthlessness towards those who opposed him. He was not beneath killing his own subjects in order to seize their land. He is also described as a liar and a manipulator who used deceit to achieve his goals. Ahab was willing to make alliances with foreign powers and marry foreign women, despite the fact that this was forbidden by Jewish law. All in all, he was a weak-willed man and an ineffective leader, unable to rule his kingdom. Ahab had allowed his wife Jezebel to exert significant influence over him and his people. Jezebel was a foreign queen who in a nutshell completely corrupted King Ahab. Ahab abused his responsibility as king and led the people of Israel into idolatry. He had completely sold himself to evil. How on earth did a king of Israel end up in such a terrible state? King Omri, Ahab's father, by all accounts he was a successful and strong military leader. It seems his strength did not rub off at all on his son Ahab. Ahab began to really change when he married Jezebel. To start with, he married Jezebel, which was forbidden by Jewish law, as she was a princess from what is now Lebanon. His first step into adult life, and Ahab was already disregarding God's laws. This was the start to a trail of destruction, death and pain for many people who crossed paths with King Ahab and his queen Jezebel. Jezebel was a Phoenician princess and the daughter of Ethbaal, the king of the coastal cities of Tyre and Sidon in what is now Lebanon. She married Ahab, who had just become the king of the northern kingdom of Israel. Jezebel's marriage to Ahab was a strategic alliance orchestrated by her father in order to strengthen his own power and influence over Israel. When Jezebel became queen, she reportedly persuaded Ahab to introduce the worship of the Tyrian god Baal Melkart, a nature god, to Israel, which was not a part of Israel's traditional religion. Easily swayed, it was not long before Ahab became involved in worshiping Baal, the god of Jezebel's people. In fact, the worship of the god Baal Melkart in Israel went completely against the God of Israel Yahweh as mandated in Jewish law. Not only did she change the religion, in a horrific move she convinced King Ahab to allow her to kill off most of the prophets of Yahweh. As a woman of fierce energy, Jezebel tried to destroy all those who opposed her. Can you imagine the type of daily horrors the people working around Jezebel had to endure? However, towards King Ahab she was the light of his life. She would have had his undivided attention. Did she do this by manipulation, or use her sexuality to control him? Did she play mind games with him? Whatever it was, it can be inferred that Jezebel used her persuasive powers over Ahab to allow her to do anything she wanted. The story of Naboth can be found in the Bible, specifically in 1 Kings 21. Naboth was a Jezreelite who owned a beautiful vineyard near King Ahab's palace in Jezreel. King Ahab wanted to buy Naboth's vineyard to make it into a vegetable garden, but Naboth refused to sell it because it was his ancestral inheritance. Ahab was so upset that he went home and sulked in his bed. If that was not bad enough, he was also refusing to eat. Bear in mind, this is a king with many lands to call his own, yet he is throwing a man-baby tantrum because he can't have this little vineyard. His wife, Jezebel, seeing how unhappy her husband was, decided to take matters into her own hands. How she planned Naboth's death is one of pure treachery and evil. The first thing she did was forge letters under Ahab's name. She led the noblemen and elders to proclaim a day of fasting and set Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Sitting near Naboth, Jezebel had placed two scoundrels who would falsely accuse Naboth of cursing both God and the king. She now had charges against him, and Naboth was to be taken outside the city and stoned to death. Her insanely evil plan had worked. Jezebel was smart enough to make sure she had two witnesses, since a death sentence could not be carried under only one witness. This manipulative woman had used all her tricks, such as lying, cheating, and finally murder. The worst part is that Jezebel had used the day of fasting to create her murderous scene. When she was told of Naboth's death, she told Ahab to go and take possession of the vineyard, which he happily did. One day, when King Ahab was out admiring his blood-stained vineyard, he came across Elijah again. As God was displeased with what had happened, he had sent Elijah to confront Ahab and pronounce judgment upon him and Jezebel. 1 Kings 21 verse 19. This is what the Lord says. In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood, yes, yours. Next, Elijah prophesied that the Lord would bring disaster on the house of Ahab, so that every male in Ahab's household would die, and rather than receive an honorable burial, they would be eaten by wild animals. Then the prophet foretold the queen's fate. Dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. When Ahab heard this, all his terrible actions he had committed must have flooded through his mind. In fear for his loved ones, including his children, he is said to have torn his clothing and thrown himself before God, asking for forgiveness. Because of these actions, God told Ahab this punishment would not occur in his lifetime. God still went ahead with the punishment. Ahab was killed in battle. His blood was washed out of the chariot in the same place where Naboth had been stoned to death, and the dogs were there, just as Elijah had said. Then we move on to the wicked demise of one of the worst women in the Bible, Jezebel. She was killed by Jehu, the commander of the Israelite army, as recorded in the Bible in 2 Kings 9. When Jehu went to Jezreel, Jezebel heard about it and adorned herself before looking out the window. As Jehu entered the gate, Jezebel taunted him, and Jehu ordered her eunuchs to throw her out the window. Jezebel died instantly upon hitting the ground, and her blood was said to hit the walls and horses. This event fulfilled the prophecy given by Elijah, that dogs would devour Jezebel's body. After Jehu killed Jezebel, he went on to kill everyone in Jezreel who was of the house of Ahab, as well as his chief men, close friends, and priests, leaving no survivors. Thus Naboth was avenged. Through this story we know God is not rushed. He will allow things to play out in order for the correct outcome. Sometimes justice just takes a little bit longer. During those moments, good people will suffer and endure evil. However, it is not for us to judge, as God will deal with all wrongdoings. Above all, we know that God is forgiving. Even a man like Ahab threw himself before the Lord, even after all the evil he had committed. This was a man who bought in false gods, killed, stole, and enjoyed it. But in his last years he had found God, and God had given him mercy. But there was still a price to pay for his deeds.